Hey, so you're probably familiar with the early 2000s, like the original Xbox loading screen and a whole bunch of those like Techo-Futurism renders, like how cool were they and like what the future's going to look like. They're actually really fun to render. So I do a lot of these for my friends. They're quite intricate and interesting to look at, but they're quite simple to make. Like there's a few different elements that we can do inside Blender. It's all rendered with eevee, so we don't have like a big overhead to render. Like even if you got a laptop, you can make one of these things. So I thought I'd show my entire process for making one of these rooms. So let's get straight into it. I've just got it set up, like this is just an example to show off all the different elements that we're going to do. Mainly how we're going to model this scene, because it does look complex. We're going to set up some emissive textures so we can get some of that nice glow, and how to get glow inside of eevee, so getting all this like volumetric lighting around using light probes. We got some animated elements as well, so we're going to learn how to set them up, and also a good old nice camera angle to show off the cool thing we just made. So that's just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's going to be covered throughout this video. It might be a little bit longer, but we will get through it. So first thing I'm going to do is come up to here and go new render. Don't want to save that, I've already saved it already, and I've got a fresh scene, and as first hit A and we just hit delete. And if I'm talking and like I don't say what I'm doing, come down here, this will show you what I've been doing. So the first thing is we're going to set up that room, and what we need is a cylinder. So hit Shift A, mesh, and come down to cylinder. We've got that set up. Hit tab to go into edit mode. I like to just go G and Z and then hold control, and then we snap it to the ground. So we've got this as our working plane. So we have like a tunnel that goes directly down, and then we have the offshoot. So what I might do is I'll hit 3 on the keyboard to go face mode, and then I'll start creating the top geometry. So I like to extrude and then right click, and that's going to set it back to 0 so I can scale it out and create that first sort of room offset. It is a bit low poly, but it is just the background, so it doesn't really matter too much. So I'm just going to hit E to extrude that up, X, and we're just going to delete that face, and same thing before, we're just going to go G, Z, bring that down, because it's always cool to have like that tunnel sort of aspect. So what I might do is just expand this out, and you can go like that. It's not going to select the back, but another cool way that you can do it is hold Alt and then select. Sometimes when it's select, it might do something crazy like that. So just make sure that you're clicking right next to the corner, and that's going to select our entire ring. So if I go scale, it's going to do something weird, but if we go Shift C, we're just scaling on that lower axis. So we're not worrying about the Z height, we're just scaling on both. And I think that is a really good area to start with. I might do some stuff later, but let's go back and start modeling that really cool tessellation geometry, because really it's quite simple. All we have to do is model one part, and then we're just going to tessellate it around. So I'm just going to bring in a cube, and what I want to do is I'm just going to hit tab, scale it down, and then go GY so I can scale it on the Y axis and bring it to this corner here. So that's sort of our starting block. But we're just going to hit tab again to come back into the modifiers over here, just so we're editing the geometry, and we're going to set up an array. So type in array, select that, and sometimes I like using prime numbers, sometimes I like using even numbers. So I think for this one I might start with 12, see how that goes. It's done some weirdness, but we want to deselect the relative offset and go to object offset. Next, we're going to hit Control A, and we're going to throw in an empty. So I usually like using the plane axis just because they're easy to grab. And then what I want to do is come back to this object, and then we're going to open this menu up, and we're going to select it. Select that empty. So now what happens is when we rotate the empty, we actually tessellate our geometry around in a circle. So you don't want to be like hard controlling, trying to get the number just right. You can come over to here, you can do the math, or you can make Blender do the math. So if we just go 360 divided by 12, boom, we've got everything set up that we need to. We've got all that geometry set up, and we can just hit tab, and then we can start extruding out and modeling the geometry. So this is where the fun starts, because we can just start grabbing and extruding out and seeing how it looks like. If I go scale X, we can start getting those forms. What I might do is just make this front bit a little thinner. So I'll just do something like that. Scale and we want to scale on the x-axis, and then like leaving the geometry on the outside just makes it easier to grab, so I might extrude that all the way down like that. So we've got going down. What I might do just to keep it going, when it hits the wall, I like to make a little section so I can grab the top and then extrude that up. What I might do, because this is looking a little flat at the moment, I can go G and then bring that up, so we've got like maybe some sort of heat sink thing. Now we can give this some interesting detail by using a loop cut, so I might just select that, just hit it, and then what you can do is go Control B to bevel, and then we can extrude along normal, so we can do something like, so we can cut it in, and that can be our techie background. While I've got it selected, it just makes it easier. I might come down to here. We're just going to add a material. So this is just the basic bare bones of what's happening. And then we're going to set up our emissive material. So we can find, again, I'm just going to call it emissive, and then we will give it a color just so it stands out. And what we want to do is come down to emission. We'll give it that same color again. Actually, maybe I might make it an orange this time because magenta. And we'll scale this number up here. So if we go into our rendered mode, we should see that material pop up if we assign it. There we go. But it's looking a little flat, and we'll deal with lighting in just a minute. I just want to finish off by adding some bevels in here to make it look a little bit more cool. So Control B, and really you just sit here and play and see what you can come out with, because it does, like, it's a bit therapeutic when you make these things. I might like round off the corners here. Could give it a chamfer or give it a bit of a rounding. What else can we do? Maybe give them a chamfer so it catches a little bit more light, and then I'll just hold Control so I can like select a line like that. Come over the other side, hold Shift first, and then Control again. So I'm selecting that line, and actually I might extend that down. So I'll do that and do that, and then go Control B, and I'll give that a chamfer too so it holds onto the light as well. So we've got something that looks really nice, and then coming out, what I might do is just shade smooth by angles. So we've got some nice smoothing around the corners. We've got some of those elements. Looks a little bit flat in certain areas, but we'll fix that up in a little bit. Cool, so that is one element, and if we wanted to do another one, like we can do the same thing again. So Control A and just start with another cube. We'll just scale it down and go GX, bring it into the same spot. So with the new one selected, what we can do is go Shift, click the big one, and then go Control L, and then we can link the modifiers. So we go copy modifiers, and that's going to copy that geometry too. But one thing is, we probably don't want to just rotate this geometry to, let's say if I want to put a line through there, because it breaks the illusion of that. So what we need to do is come into edit mode, and then we can do the rotation. So say you want that sort of geometry thing again. So I might scale the X down again, or scale Y, and then I want to just hit / to isolate it. If you can't just grab the object, I'm going to go GX, bring that out, and then hit / again. So I've got that object, but it's hidden by that, and I sort of want it to run along in that little part. To rotate it, like if you go and click Z up here, rotate, it's not going to do what we want. That is a cool effect, but if we want to rotate by that cursor point, we can come up here, click, and then select by 3D cursor. When we hit rotate, we can bring it into that center point there. So if I have a look, we're getting that cool effect, and maybe I do a little bit more geometry. So what I might do is just extrude it a little bit more, and we'll bring this column down here, and then I'll bevel this edge. Maybe something like that. And then same thing, I'll give it a chamfer. Also, if you want to know how I'm doing that, it's the scroll wheel to adjust the bevel cut. Cool, so I think that's a really good position for our geometry, and like you can go for days modeling this thing, but as you saw, it's such a simple little thing that we have to model, and then we use tessellation to add our complexity. So what I might do, I just want to set this background to smooth, so I'm just going to right click and go shade not shade smooth, shade by angle. So it's going to make the walls look nice and smooth, but it's not that much geometry. But like I said, when I come back here, I would say I'd fix up the shading. This is a 4.1 thing. In previous versions, you would have to go to a setting to change it. But if we add the modifier, I'm just going to type in smooth. So smooth by angle, we're going to throw that in. If we bring that back down, you can see the, like if we go to 0, it's going to be that flat shaded version. But if we just bump it up, I'm just going to use it to like take some of those elements off, but still have some of that sort of techie background. So that is how you shade in 4.1, like control the auto smooth. But now I want to light this thing because right now it looks pretty flat. For our lighting, the big thing I want to add first is an area light. So I'm going to select that and grab it, scale it out, and I might use this color the whole way through. So what I want to do is I'm just going to get that material, select the color, use the hex, and I'm going to copy that so it's always with me. And then I'm going to select that light again, come down to light, choose the color and paste the light. Cool. It's a little bit dark, so usually I start with 10,000. That's a good starting point. That looks nice, and I might set this to disk so it's not conflicting with things. Scale it so it's just inside the area, and then I'm going to rotate by 180. So holding control, it'll snap. And then I'm just going to put this at the bottom of the tube. Cool, so it's at the bottom of the mesh. It's not conflicting. Our camera is going to be here, so I might set that up soon. But we can just play with the number until we get a nice ambient glow. Like I said, I might make that camera, so I'm just going to hit Control A, camera. It's in a spot, but I want it somewhere about here. So with the camera being there, I want to sort of bring it to my camera view. So the way we can do that is go Control Alt 0 on the numpad, and we can move it around. So I like to keep things in whole numbers. So as I can see, I might move the X position to 0. Yeah, so we go 6.5 and 8. And that should keep it in a nice position. Just move it. We can adjust it like this, but it just keeps everything nice and centered. We'll keep that 38, 0, 180. So it's perfectly aligned. So we have that sort of geometric view, but the angle's a little bit too tight, and the camera does use a standard lens to start with, so 50mm is usually a pretty good standard lens, but I want a nice wide angle lens, so a good number or number range to be around is 18 to 24, so I might just type in 18. Yeah, that's starting to get some of the background, we're getting some of those foreground assets, but really it's still pitch black up here, and I had some really nice blending. So how do we set that up? Alright, so we've got our light, but really it still looks very flat, and this is where we can start using light probes to capture our emissive map around the texture. So there's a few different ways that we can do it. A super cheap way to get some nice looking point lights is we come into light probe and then go sphere. Now that's going to pump our sphere. We can scale that over our asset or where we want the light to happen. And if we come up into render and bake indirect lighting, it's going to block it in. So we've got some nice underground lighting. So if we go 0, like we've got our area and we can see it, but we can get a little bit more articulate about this one. So I'll just keep that in there, but I might bring it down there and just bake it so we've got that like sort of, so I might keep it there just so we've got some indirect lighting seeing the stuff. And then what we want to do is go Shift A, and then we'll go and grab a volume. So this one's going to have a whole bunch of little points through our object, and this is where we can actually control individual points of lighting, and it's going to try and bake it across the area. But what you don't want to do is just come in here, you can click and drag, but just like make it look like that, because that's going to take a lot of time to bake. So what we want to do is use the correct amount of dots for the amount of detail we have. And really, we're not really caring about that Z because we just got the walls there. So we can drop that one right down to maybe like 3 or 2. I like 2. I just want that bottom piece. So G, Z, we're just going to put that on the inside because really we want that to light our floor. So just go and bring that up. And as you can see how those dots are laying out in our environment, that's how we want those light points to react. So what I might do is scale that like that. So I might scale it down again. So we've got points at the base, but we also got points that cover the tops as well. So we've got lighting coming from the top and lighting coming from the bottom. Now that we've got this point grid, like it's going to depend on the resolution and power of your PC, but like that's a pretty high unit. What I might do is just let it run and then do a higher version so you can see the details. So all we need to do again is we have it selected, come up to render and bake indirect lighting. So you'll see down here you've got this like little counter going, and we'll just leave it and come back when it's done. So as you can see, when you bake the light, it sort of bakes it in the background, so you still got that real time to be able to see what's going on, but it does have this sort of pixelated look to it. So there's two ways that you can handle it. Like one, when I come to that rendered view, I didn't get it high enough, so you get these sort of dark edges, and you can go more resolution, so add more points and let it run, probably go away, get a coffee and come back. Or you can go less points and then we can use some nice post-processing tricks to cover it up. So I'm probably going to redo this one. So we'll go to volume. I'm going to change its resolution. So I'll drop it down. So like the points are there, but not as dense. Probably give it some more height points like that. So scale Z. So we just make sure that all the area that we're looking at has points in it. So this is probably going to run about the same amount of time, because when we add layers on the Z height, that's going to multiply our time by a butt ton. So I'm just going to run this again. So that looks a lot nicer than a flat background. We do have some artifacts, but I think this next stage is just going to make it look a little bit nicer. And we're going to set up some post-processing. So on this render tab, we've got motion blur, which I might turn on a little bit later for our animations, but our bloom. So I want to turn that one on. And as you can see, it added a nice bit of filter over the top. So it's just taking those bright areas and blowing out the image. So sort of like how film works. But we have some controls here. Usually they're pretty good. We don't want it so it's like the whole thing is in bloom. We just bring it back down, and then we can adjust, maybe add some ambient occlusion if it needs it. I like it better without. So we've got this environment ready to go. So the next thing I think this needs is some ring light. So what I'm going to do is create a curved circle. So this is not just mesh, it's like it's a geometric thing. I'm going to duplicate it because I want to animate some and I want some static. So I've got this one set up to be the static one. So just meaning it's just going to put rings around the place. And then I'm going to add that emissive material. So put it there. And then under the data tab in geometry, with the bevel, select round, and then you can just like tweak it up just a tiny little bit. And as you can see, we've got some rings, but we don't want to scale it, because if we scale it, see how it's created like a chunky size. If we want to keep them all the same size, just make sure that you keep the scale correct, and then hit tab, and then in edit mode, we can scale it out and get those rings. So I was thinking about putting one in here. Shift D, duplicate, right click, put it back to where it was, scale it out again. We can put one, give it a little bit of height, we can put some rings in there. So Shift D, scale it out, Shift D, scale it out. Maybe we take this original ring and then we drop it down into the hole. So I'm going to select this one by clicking on there, hitting L. That's going to select everything that's connected. Shift D, G, Z, and we drop it down. So we've got maybe a ring there. What's the camera say? Yep, we can still see it. So Shift D, G, Z, and we've got a few rings around, and that's going to look nice. And as you can see, we can see that resolution happen. So like the low polyness, what we can do is come up to resolution here and just bump that up a little bit until we can see those geometries going away. If you want to clearly see what the geometry is doing, you can come in here, see how you can see the individuals. So might give it a little bit more resolution like that. We can do this resolution will turn the axis around. So do something like that, because we don't really need that geometry. We're just getting rings. So if we come back into camera view and then we'll go back to render, we've got some nice rings. Cool, so we're at that point where we can start animating some things. And I did save this ring off to animate. So what I'm going to do is same thing again, give it some resolution, so some round, maybe bring this up a little bit, and then we're going to apply that emissive material. And then we're going to create a stack of rings. So Shift D, G, Z, 3 will do. So just looking through the camera view, just making sure they're all pretty close together. You can do some things to make sure they're all pretty much on point, but this will do for me. And what I want to do is make them so they do an individual bounce. So just selecting all 3, make sure we're at 1. we're going to hit I, and that's going to put a keyframe in for everything. So we've got everything selected. Now we're making a looping animation, and we want to make sure that these are going to follow around and come back around. So we want to pick a number that is like 1 cycle or 2 cycles or 3 cycles through this entire timeline. So I'm going to keep with the 250 frames just because it's default and we can work with that. So I want 1 cycle to happen in 125 frames. So it's got 2 different points. So 125, we pick the halfway point, which would be like 62.5, but we don't have that 0.5. So I usually just drop it back 1, G, Z, and then hit I. So we've got that initial build up, and then come to 125, we can select this point over here. We can sort of see what's being rendered. So we've got all that selected. Copy and paste, but sometimes it pastes for all, so we can do it individually as well. So copy paste, and then copy paste, and select that one, copy paste. So now we have 1 cycle of animation, but then it stops. Now, how do we get this cycling? This is a bit of a trick, but we come up to the animation tab, and what I like to do is change this view into the graph editor. So we're going to select it, choose graph editor. So we can actually see what the animation looks like. It's a spline, but we do have access to, so I'm just going to go to this Z location. So that's making our object go like that. And then we want to collect modifiers. This is a little unsung hero, but what we want to do is go add modifier cycles. So as you saw, we've got cycles happening before and cycles happening after. So what I want to do is copy this into the copy buffer for the Fmod modifiers, because we're just going to do the same thing for each one. So we want to go select the Z location, and then we can hit the paste icon, and then it's going to get the same information. And then we want that first circle, same thing, Z, come up here, paste. So now all of them post that animation will keep cycling. All right, so we're in a really good spot right now, but as you can see, all our objects move up and down, and we need some way to offset those animations. Now, you can come in here and manually offset them, and you want to offset them 1/3 of the animation, so 250 divided by 3, and then you offset one, and then you offset the other one. But there is a nice little tool that we can get access to, and it's called Commotion, and it lives up here in this one, but you probably won't be able to find it. We need to activate it. So go to Edit, Preferences, and then what I'll do is I'm going to leave a link down below so you can go download it, and then you want to click Install and go to your downloads and install it. And from there, all you need to do is type in Commotion. Usually when you install it, you find it, and then you press that tick, and that's going to activate it. So I'll leave a link to it so you can find it, but this does help with these sort of cyclical animations. And then what we want to do is we're going to do the offset, but I don't want to do the math. We'll let Blender do the math. So 250 divided by 3, which gives us that number. We probably want to make it a whole number so it's not going to go crazy. And then we go offset animation. So making sure it's at the 0.2, because if we do that offset animation, it's going to do it from that point. But if we let this run through now and see how it goes, we've got that sort of oscillating animation, which does look very nice and very attractive. But when it hits that last point, if we did all our math correct, it should line up perfectly and we have no issues with looping. Alright, so our scene is looking pretty snazzy right now. I reran the indirect lighting bake just so these rings have a little bit more light around the area. But as you see with the original renders, I do like adding some floating geometric wireframe thingy above. So we're going to throw one of them in. I'm just going to keep it basic by throwing in a cube, but any mesh you can sort of do this to because of the modifier trick that we're going to do later. So I'm just going to add a cube. I want to scale it down, but another way that we can do it is just hit S. It's going to scale the actual transform data. So if we want to reset that, go Control A and then hit a scale. So that's applying the scale and bring it back to 0.1. GZ, so it's within the frame. So usually I like it somewhere there. So what I might do is just scale up a little bit so it's back in that viewport. And then I want to add that emissive material, so I can do that. It's big blowout light, so what I want to do is come up to the modifiers and type in wireframe. With that selected, you can see it working, and then we can scale it up. Now, I want to just throw a basic animation onto this one, and these looping animations are really simple to set up. I want to bring it all the way over to the edge, and then come up into Object Properties. I'm going to hit I on the rotation. So this is just going to animate the rotation. come all the way to the end of our animation, and we're going to type in 360. So for the sake of this, 360 and 0 are the same number, but it does one full rotation. You can have a play here, and like say if you want to rotate it 2 times in that, you can go times 2 and it will do like 720. So we're just going to rotate it on 2 axes to see what it does. So 360 here as well. I'm going to hit I, there we go, and then we can see that it's animating. But there's a bit of an issue with our loop. It's got a slow start and a slow end, which is very apparent with our looping animation. So to fix that, we're going to hit right click, go to interpolation mode and go to linear. So now when we start this from the start, it's going to be a wham, and it just starts rotating at a very set speed. So when we come over to the end of our animation, it lines up perfectly and everything's running in a nice loop. So I am very happy where I'm at right now. There are a few little more things that I want to play with, like we are running this in eevee, so rendering it's going to be very quick, but we're going to focus on that export part now. One thing I would like to add to this, because it's very bright, I'm just going to bring it back a little bit. So we don't want to change the lighting information here, but we can change our camera settings by going to render, coming over down all the way to the bottom, color management, and we'll leave these numbers here, but exposure. So if you ever play with the camera, we play with the exposure to like give us our lighting back. So I can tweak that so it's a little bit darker, like a little bit more moody. What I might do as well, because it's very orange, I might throw in a secondary color. So we're going to do that with the light. So I've just got that area light selected down the bottom, Shift D, G, Z, bring it up and out, maybe G, Z again. And then we're going to rotate that by 180 again. So we just bring that back down to 0. It's going to push more light into our scene. I've just hit 0 to go back into the camera mode. Come to the light, and then we want to give it a secondary color. So we'll choose something that's opposite, so across the way, and then I'm just going to start at 10, so it's like no light, and then we can slowly bring it up till it starts affecting our area. So you get some of that nice secondary colors on our render. So I like that. It's got a nice lot of elements. So the reason why I like using a wide angle lens on this, it's a lot more dynamic, but it also gives us that lovely TikTok thing of being able to slit out the center and then make that a secondary render. So if we render this up as a big enough resolution, we'll be able to export it and then do the cut in post. Or if you know the size of the device that you're working on, you can plot those numbers into Blender here using these values here. I'm going to keep the frame rate at 24 frames. I just want to make sure this is a little bit smoother so I can activate motion blur, so it's going to add like lots of nice blurriness when things are moving quick, but I don't think this is going to be moving quick enough for it to kick in. Maybe just at these like extremities. Does add a little bit of flavor, and then we're just going to give it a good name directory that we're going to save out. And then what we want to do is go fmpeg video and then go down to encoding, and I like switching it to MP4, and I usually do perceptually lossless because lossless, no information is lost. Perceptually lossless, it's almost there, but we got a little bit less of a file size. So I am very happy right now, and really, like, if you make a dud, don't feel bad. Like, you can come back, do all these steps again and get something completely different. Like, you can play with different colors, you can play with different shapes of tessellation, you can change up those objects in the center, but all these steps will get you something that looks really cool like this. So I hope you enjoyed this video, because really I do like making these sort of like techie vibe, cyber futurism backgrounds. They are fun to make, and like you can try out a whole bunch of different things and not feel like you have to commit to a massive project, but get a really nice render out in the end. So I hope you did like this one, and if you did, do hit that thumbs up, because it does tell the algorithm to point this to other people that are probably trying to learn Blender or some nice little projects to try out, and this is definitely up their alley. And if you do have any comments or queries, please feel free to leave them down below. I do feel like I glaze over a few of the subjects when I'm talking about this sort of stuff, but I do try and show everything in the video, so if you have any, just feel free to leave them down below. And if you did like this one, I do have a bit of Blender content on my channel about making these types of backgrounds, so if you want to go look at that, I look forward to seeing you next time.